Imagine it is a Saturday afternoon. You are sitting on the floor of your living room, and surrounding you is, well, an absolute ocean of wooden boards, cardboard, and plastic bags filled with tiny, confusing metal pieces.
Oh, and you cannot forget the styrofoam getting everywhere.
Right. And you are staring at this instruction manual that contains 0 actual words. It is just these strange, slightly menacing little drawings. And you feel that sudden cold rush of sheer panic. You look at the pile and think, I have made a terrible mistake.
It is like an incredibly universal modern experience. That is the exact moment the illusion breaks. It is the realization that buying a place to sit is no longer just a simple transaction. I mean, it is basically a part-time job you accidentally signed up for.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the very modern, surprisingly complex experience of buying furniture today. And to do this, we're looking at some really fascinating sources. We have industry reports on global supply chain logistics, consumer psychology studies, and retail market analysis.
Right. And our mission today is to understand the huge strategic shift that has completely transformed the furniture market. Because the main theme in all these sources is a massive transfer of responsibility.
A transfer from the company to the consumer, right?
Exactly. Decades ago, the furniture industry handled the logistics, the delivery, and all the heavy lifting. But today, those burdens have been pushed entirely onto you, the buyer.
So we are going to trace that whole journey today. We will look at the economics of where we choose to shop, the physical challenge of actually getting the item into your home, and finally, the psychological trap of putting it all together.
So let us start with where you actually buy the furniture. Because before you even look at a confusing manual, you have to decide where to shop. And looking at the market data, there is a huge divide in how we buy things today.
Right, we basically have the traditional physical store, and then we have the digital storefront online.
And the data shows these are not just 2 different ways to buy a couch. They are entirely different economic models. I mean, when you walk into a physical furniture store, you are in a very high overhead environment.
Because the retailer's paying for a lot of stuff, right?
Exactly. They pay for a massive showroom, climate control, sales staff, and all that actual inventory sitting right there on the floor.
But from the consumer's perspective, I think that overhead pays for a really crucial test. For me, looking at the sources, the absolute biggest advantage of shopping in store is the physical audit.
Physical audit, yeah.
You can walk right up to a dining chair, sit on it, lean back, and genuinely feel if it is sturdy. You can open a drawer and feel whether it glides smoothly on metal tracks or if it just drags on the wood.
That concept of verifying if something is sturdy is central to traditional furniture shopping. Historically, furniture was an heirloom purchase. It was meant to last forever. You were evaluating the strong wood joints, the heavy hardwood, the quality of the fabric.
And in a physical space, your brain processes all that data instantly. Like if you push a bookcase and it wobbles, you just reject it immediately. You have perfect information about that object.
Right. You have total transparency. But then we look at the other side of the market, the digital route. Shopping from the total comfort of your current, possibly broken couch.
Which is so much easier. The choices are endless, and the algorithms show you exactly the style you searched for.
And that digital model completely cuts out all the physical overhead. Online retailers operate out of massive, highly efficient warehouses outside the cities. They do not need sales staff or nice display windows. They just store flat boxes on steel shelves.
Which brings us to the main benefit for the buyer. Because the overhead is so low, you get a really tempting discount. But I want to challenge the nature of that discount based on the market analysis we read. Isn't buying furniture online essentially a blind date?
Oh, that is interesting. How are you defining the risk there?
Well, think about the lack of information. You go online and you see a perfect digital image of a sofa. The lighting is amazing. The room around it is perfectly staged, or maybe even computer generated.
Right, the retailer controls the whole image.
Exactly. So you are trading the physical test, the ability to know if it's truly sturdy for like a 30% discount. You have absolutely no idea if the cushions are rock hard or if the frame is made of cheap wood until it is physically inside your house.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. You are basically getting a discount to absorb the risk of the unknown. And the industry knows this. The sources show that online stores try to fix this blind date anxiety using customer reviews.
Right. They build a system where you have to trust a total stranger who claims the chair is very comfortable.
But one person's comfortable and sturdy is another person's total nightmare. A 5-star review does not guarantee the legs won't snap when your dog jumps on it.
Yeah, exactly. which is why we see this really interesting behavior in the data called showrooming.
Oh, showrooming is fascinating. People will go to the expensive physical store, do the touch test to find a really sturdy piece, quietly check the brand tag, and then just leave to hunt for a discount on that exact item online.
Which is brutal for the physical stores, but it makes total sense for the buyer. You want the perfect information of the showroom combined with the massive online discount.
However, this brings us to a critical turning point in the whole process, because whether you secure that sturdy piece in-store or you roll the dice on a digital discount, you suddenly have to face the reality of physics.
The item actually exists in the real world now.
Right. And now it must exist inside your living room, which means we have to talk about logistics.
Oh, the logistics.
Yeah.
This is where the deep dive gets incredibly practical, because according to the reports, this is the exact moment the whole dream usually falls apart.
The difficulty here really cannot be overstated. We see a huge failure rate simply because consumers misunderstand the absolute necessity of taking accurate measurements. And we are not just talking about checking if a rug fits under a coffee table.
No, the research points to a much bigger problem with the building itself. People will carefully measure the empty corner of their living room to ensure the new sofa fits perfectly, but they entirely forget about the physical pathway to get the sofa to that corner.
Consider the history of how homes were built. If you live in a house from the 1920s or a standard apartment, your doorways, hallways, and stairs were built to very specific, narrow dimensions.
Right. A standard interior door might only give you about 30 inches of space.
Meanwhile, modern furniture has just gotten huge. We want deeper seats, massive sofas, oversized beds. So you have a fundamental geometric conflict between big modern furniture and old building codes.
And this is exactly why taking measurements of the delivery pathway is mandatory. You have to map the corners of your hallway. You have to measure the angle of your staircase.
If you live on the 4th floor, you absolutely must know the measurements of the elevator door.
I have to ask, based on the supply chain data we reviewed, is skipping those pathway measurements the single most expensive mistake a furniture buyer can make?
Without a doubt.
Because a massive online discount completely vanishes if the delivery team cannot physically get the item through the front door.
It is arguably the most common and costly mistake. Because if it does not fit, you are immediately dealing with return shipping fees and the huge headache of sending a heavy item back across the country.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
But what is truly fascinating is how delivery has evolved depending on where you bought the item.
Right. If you buy from a traditional in-store model, the delivery is usually baked into the business. They operate on a white glove delivery standard.
Yes, which involves trained professionals in a truck. They check the measurements, physically carry it through your narrow hallways, place the piece exactly where you want it, and crucially, they remove all the trash.
Which sounds like an absolute dream. But the logistics data shows that online retailers operate completely differently. They do not use dedicated furniture movers.
Because that is how you maintain the big discount. An online retailer optimizes for volume and speed. They hand the item off to a global shipping network that treats your massive heavy desk the exact same way they treat a box of paper towels.
Right. Their only goal is just getting it to your property.
Correct. The white glove service is gone. So the standard procedure is just to drop a heavy box at your front door, take a quick blurry photo of it, and drive away.
So the responsibility of the final 50 feet, getting it over the doorstep, up the stairs, and into the room, now belongs entirely to you. You are suddenly an unpaid moving company.
And you really have to engineer that whole journey before you click buy.
I am sweating just thinking about trying to pivot a giant heavy cardboard box around a narrow staircase. Okay, so let's assume we survived the delivery. The measurements were correct, the driver dropped it off, and you've somehow dragged it inside.
The box is finally sitting on your rug.
Now you face the final phase. You have to finish the manufacturing process. You have to deal with the assembly. We really need to dive into the engineering of flat pack furniture here.
Yes, because flat pack is the engine that makes the whole modern digital furniture market possible. The central problem of traditional furniture is that you are paying to ship empty space.
Right. A fully assembled armchair is mostly just air inside a wooden frame.
Exactly. When you load a shipping container overseas, you can only fit a few dozen built chairs inside. That makes the shipping cost per chair astronomically high. So the engineers applied what is basically an industrial game of Tetris.
I love that comparison. The designers are no longer just designing a chair. They are designing a puzzle that must fold into a completely flat box.
And if they eliminate the air, they can fit 1,000 disassembled chairs into that same shipping container. The shipping cost drops by 90%.
And that extreme efficiency is exactly how we get the massive discount online. But the trade-off is pretty rough. To make it fit in the flat box, they have to compromise on the structural strength.
Yeah, they cannot use strong, interlocking wood joints. They have to rely on cheap metal locks, wooden pegs, and particle board.
Which inherently limits how sturdy the final piece can actually be. And more importantly, it transfers the final stage of factory labor directly to you.
You literally become the assembly line worker.
Which brings me to a story from the consumer experience reports in our sources. It is so relatable and perfectly illustrates the sheer stress of flatback assembly.
Oh, please walk us through it. What is the classic experience here?
So, the story follows a buyer who purchased a highly rated flatpack bookshelf online. They got a great discount. The box is on the floor. They cut the tape open, and immediately they see the first classic trick. The illusion of simplicity.
Ah, yes. The instruction manual that looks like a friendly comic book.
Exactly. Step 1 shows a cheerful little drawing of a person effortlessly sliding 2 pristine boards together. The buyer thinks, oh, this is a 20-minute job. But then they open the hardware pack. They pour out a bag with 40 wooden pegs and 50 tiny metal screws.
And this is where the microscopic tolerances of modern manufacturing kick in.
Right. Because here's the psychological torture. There are 2 distinct types of screws, and they differ in length by exactly 1 millimeter.
And because the manual uses no words to save on translation costs, there is no text warning you about this subtle difference.
None at all. You are sitting on the floor, squinting at a diagram, trying to determine if the screw in your hand matches a blurry drawing. So the buyer makes an educated guess. They spend an hour on their knees, they're sweating, their back hurts, but they power through.
They are determined.
They get the main vertical frame of the bookshelf standing. They step back to admire their structural engineering. And that is when they notice the most devastating mistake in flatpack assembly.
Let me guess. They put a piece in backward.
Catastrophically backward. You know how flatpack panels usually have a nice painted finish on the front, but the back edge is just raw, ugly, unfinished brown board?
Right, because that specific edge is designed to face the wall, completely hidden from view.
Well, our brave builder installed the primary middle shelf backward. The raw, crumbly, unfinished brown edge is facing proudly right out into the center of the living room.
Oh, that is a remarkably demoralizing moment. Because the logic of flatpack means you cannot easily fix an isolated mistake.
Exactly. You cannot just slide the shelf out. Because of the way the metal locks work, fixing that one backward shelf requires undoing everything. You have to remove the top plate, carefully loosen the sides, take out the tiny metal screws without breaking the cheap wood, physically flip the shelf, and rebuild the whole thing.
It's a profound test of human patience.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the buyer spends another hour painstakingly reversing their work. They're frustrated, they're tired, but eventually they drive the final screw. The bookshelf is standing. It is a victorious conclusion. But when they push it with a single finger, it is just slightly wobbly.
It is invariably wobbly. Because you are an amateur builder working with cheap materials, it is never perfectly sturdy.
Right. But they are so mentally exhausted, they just accept the wobble. And this specific frustration brings us to the most fascinating psychological concept in our sources today. The research outlines something called the IKEA effect.
Yes, the cognitive bias study. This is where the behavioral economics get truly interesting. The IKEA effect describes a bias where consumers place a much higher value on products they partially built themselves.
Exactly. The researchers found that when people build something, even if it is a wobbly flatpack bookshelf, they subconsciously value it more than an identical, perfectly built item created by an expert. The physical labor actually changes our perception of its worth.
It is effort justification. Because you sacrificed your Saturday afternoon, because you suffered through the confusing diagrams and the backward shelf, your brain demands a return on that investment. You convince yourself that the wobbly bookshelf is actually a huge success.
But I want to push back on that a bit. Are we actually valuing the furniture more, or is this just a trick? I mean, the industry has successfully convinced us to perform free factory labor in exchange for a discount, and then our own brains trick us into thinking we enjoyed the process.
That is the brilliant, almost invisible nature of the modern furniture market. It is a highly calculated trade-off. We have agreed to accept lower structural quality, the stress of logistics, and the burden of assembly. And in return, we get a trendy look and a lower price tag today.
We really have transitioned into a society of amateur furniture builders. And grasping the mechanics of this shift gives you a massive strategic advantage the next time you need to buy a piece.
Absolutely. So let us summarize these insights for you, the listener, for your next purchase. First, recognize the economic choice you are making. Are you willing to pay the higher cost of a physical store to secure perfect information and guarantee a piece is sturdy?
Or are you willing to accept the risk of an online blind date in exchange for a big discount?
Exactly. Second, you must take ownership of the logistics. Before you schedule any delivery, double-check the measurements of your entire logistical pathway. Do not just measure the final room.
Measure the front door, the width of the hallways, the turning radius of the stairs. You must ensure the geometry works before the box arrives.
And finally, when that heavy box does arrive, understand the journey of flat pack assembly. You are acting as the final stage of a global supply chain. Organize your hardware carefully, study the unfinished edges in the diagrams, and recognize that the frustration you feel is just a documented feature of the system.
Armed with these frameworks, your next furniture buying adventure does not have to end in an ocean of panic or a couch trapped on a sidewalk. You can navigate the market strategically.
You can balance your time, your budget, and your tolerance for tiny metal screws.
But before we officially wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought based on this massive industry shift. Something to ponder the next time you're sitting on the floor with a blister on your thumb.
What is the final question?
Well, we discussed the IKEA effect. The idea that our physical effort makes us value our creations. But consider the reality of flat-pack materials. They are inherently designed to be somewhat temporary.
Right. They are not really built to last a lifetime.
As we universally accept this model of self-assembly to save on shipping and get a quick discount, are we fundamentally changing our definition of what furniture even is?
That is a critical question.
Historically, a sturdy dining table was an heirloom. It was passed down through generations. But today, if you know the wobbly bookshelf in your living room will probably crumble the next time you try to move apartments. Well, does the frustrating assembly process actually make you view modern furniture as merely disposable?
It forces you to wonder if the concept of heirloom furniture is entirely incompatible with the modern online market.
Exactly. Are we trading generational stability for the immediate convenience of a flat box? So the next time you are staring down that confusing instruction manual, ask yourselves, are you building a lasting cornerstone of your home, or are you just completing a temporary puzzle designed for a shipping container? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.